what has been quite a turbulent period. A lot of GPP 2022 was written during the COVID era, if you like, and a lot of changes have happened principally because of that. A lot of the enhanced content that has gone out from companies and other places. So that's a nutshell history of the GPP manuscript. And what I'd like to do now is touch base with Sam Mathew, my colleague, who is an industry expert, and he will be able to give us a rundown of how GPP is used in industry and what impact it might have. Sam, next, transitioning to you.
Thank you, Declan. So next slide, please. Yeah. Hello. Thank you, everyone. So welcome to the session on the overview of publication development process in pharmaceutical companies. So in the next 10 minutes, my objective is to give you a high-level understanding of why pharmaceutical companies publish research and data and the publication development process within this pharmaceutical companies. Next slide, please. So as we all know, pharmaceutical companies are engaged in research and development, manufacturing and marketing of life-saving drugs. So for pharmaceutical companies to market a drug, need approval from competent health regulatory authorities, such as FDA in the US, EMA in the Europe, and MEDPA in the UK. So these competent health authorities provide permission to market drug based on reviewing and assessing the evidence submitted by the pharmaceutical companies to substantiate their claims. So therefore, to produce this evidence, pharmaceutical companies conduct clinical research. They conduct translational biomarker studies, non-clinical research, health economics, real-world evidence, and outcome research. Multiple type of research they conduct to bring down kind of evidences. So the regulatory submission arising from this research are definitely multidisciplinary effort that actually needs appropriate synchronization of R&D, commercial and manufacturing functions over a long period. So as you know, the drug development process is run into decades, and it's a long and high cost evolving activity. Next slide, please. In addition to submitting this data to the health regulatory authorities to obtain marketing authorization, pharmaceutical companies also make the data publicly available. There are multiple reasons to make this data publicly available. First and foremost is ethical obligation, because the public expectations for transparency in the conduct and reporting of clinical trials are much higher, and they expect everything to be transparent to the public. And they also want to comply with the transparency regulations by competent authorities. We have seen the competent authorities in the previous slide. And also they made the data publicly available to ensure that the specific exchange of research data. Make this data publicly available has multiple benefits. First and foremost, it builds trust and accountability. It ensures the participants are protected from unnecessary studies. It prevents redundant studies and maximizes research funding. And it will also help the pharmaceutical companies by educating the health professionals, which may turn into commercial benefits for their business. And where are these data published? Data are published in multiple platforms. The pharmaceutical companies publish the transparency websites, which are hosted by the health regulatory authorities. Also publish in their company websites or other marketing websites, peer-reviewed publication journals, and presentations at conferences. Can we go to the next slide, please? At the same time, for pharmaceutical company, getting research published in a peer-reviewed medical journal is like winning a stamp of approval from its most influential audience. So peer-reviewed publications in journals are highly preferred by the pharmaceutical companies, and there can be multiple types of peer-reviewed publications from a single clinical study. So primary manuscript usually derived from the primary objective of a clinical trial, and there are secondary manuscripts that are typically come from the secondary objectives or the exploratory objective of a clinical trial. So there can also be review articles analysis, systematic reviews, narrative reviews, etc. We have seen the peer-reviewed publications in journals are highly preferred because they impact the medical practice. They drive treatment decisions and impact patient outcomes. They also generate essential information for healthcare professionals. The medical publication team is responsible for developing peer-reviewed manuscripts in the industry, in a pharmaceutical industry. They develop these publications based on the publication policy of the organization, and of course, the medical publication team are the cornerstone of implementing medical communication strategy for any pharmaceutical organizations. Next slide, please. Publication planning gives the life cycle of a drug, and publication planning is an essential step in developing a publication by a pharmaceutical company. So usually the timelines of publications and where the publication will appear are detailed in the publication plan itself. This plan is generally created before the beginning of the clinical trial, and the primary publications are published before the pre-launch. Similarly, the secondary publications are also published after the marketing authorization. But there is no hard and fast rule that every sponsor should follow this these timelines, but they can vary from sponsor to sponsor. But in a nutshell, the role of publication planning is that the research is published and presented in a responsible, ethical, and timely manner. Next slide, please. Yeah. So the publication steering committee is formed, the sponsor or publication professional, for the data is available, and will have internal and external stakeholders. So the committee will inform the study about the membership and its responsibilities. So I'm not going into the ideal situation of the publication steering committee that are part of the GPP. So only giving an overall high level understanding about what is publication steering committee. The steering committee meet at time points. So they meet the beginning of the initial planning of the proposed manuscripts, and as and when the data is available from the clinical trial. The publication steering committee identifies the authors, contributors, writers, and the reviewers. And of course, the authorship will be strictly based on the ICMJE criteria. So the publication working group is formed to ensure that the authorship and the authorship decisions are solely depend upon ISMPP criteria. They also help in developing the content, obtaining review and approval, and also maintain the auditable documentation and communicating the information with the stakeholders. Once all the deliverables are completed for the specific publication plan, the publication working group, so the publication steering committee is disbanded, and the same is documented for any further evaluation. Next slide, please. Let's understand what is the overview of manuscript development that happens in a pharmaceutical company. So the manuscript development process actually starts with a kickoff meeting in which they actually discuss the support of a medical writer and the critical data that needs to be published and the target journal. So during the manuscript development, all the authors should read all the content. A lead author, a publication writer, or a publication professional actually manages the review and the approval process. So all authors should receive all the documents. That's very, very important. And during the final, a disclosure information is also collected, and the permission for acknowledgements also obtained by the publication group, and the final approval for the submission is also obtained from the authors. Once the final approval is obtained from the authors, the manuscript is submitted to the journal, and the post-publication of corresponding author and manages any communication for the journal. It can also be supported by sometimes the publication professional. Next slide, please. To conclude, what we have seen is the pharmaceutical companies publish research data for scientific exchange. And among many medium of publication, the publication in peer-reviewed journal is highly preferred by pharmaceutical companies. So we have also seen that the publication development is a highly professional and organized process in many pharmaceutical companies. During this process, significant care is taken to follow the applicable regulations and the guidelines to uphold the ethical standards to improve efficiency of the publication process altogether. Thank you so much. So I'll conclude this. Thank you so much for your patient listening.
Great. Thank you very much, Sam. And just before I introduce the next speaker, let me just jump back because I didn't introduce Sam properly because he's really famous in my world. But let me